When Lisa Morrison opened the front door expecting to see the pizza delivery guy, she instead found herself face to face with a woman she'd never met before. The woman was holding a casserole dish and smiling warmly. "Hi, you must be the neighbor," the woman said cheerfully. "I'm Jennifer. Jennifer Morrison. I just wanted to introduce myself since my husband and I will be staying here for a few days." Lisa felt the blood drain from her face, because Lisa's last name was also Morrison, and the man this woman was calling her husband, he was Lisa's husband too. It started as an ordinary Tuesday evening in the quiet suburb of Maple Ridge, Connecticut. Lisa had been married to Thomas Morrison for 8 years. They had 2 children, a beautiful home, and what she thought was a perfectly normal, if somewhat routine, marriage. Thomas worked in medical device sales, a job that required frequent travel. He'd leave on Monday mornings and return Friday evenings, spending the work week visiting hospitals and clinics across the Northeast. It was exhausting, he'd always told her, but the money was good and it provided well for their family. Lisa had never questioned it. Why would she? Thomas was a devoted father when he was home. He attended every soccer game he could, helped with homework, and spent weekends doing projects around the house. He was attentive to Lisa, remembered anniversaries and birthdays, and seemed genuinely happy with their life together. Sure, the travel was hard on their relationship sometimes. Lisa often felt like a single parent during the week, but lots of families dealt with similar situations. She considered herself lucky to have such a hard-working, dedicated husband. What Lisa didn't know was that when Thomas left on those Monday mornings, he wasn't just going to work. He was going to his other life, his other home, his other wife, and his other 2 children. The woman at the door that Tuesday evening was Jennifer Morrison, and she lived in Riverside, New York, about 90 miles away from Maple Ridge. She'd been married to Thomas Morrison for 6 years. She also had 2 children with him. She also thought she had a normal marriage to a hard-working medical device salesman who traveled frequently for work. The only difference was that Jennifer thought Thomas worked Monday through Wednesday and came home Wednesday evenings, while Lisa thought he worked Monday through Friday. "I'm sorry," Lisa managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think there's been some kind of mistake. This is my house. I live here with my husband, Thomas Morrison." Jennifer's smile faltered. She looked confused, then concerned. "That's impossible," she said slowly. "My husband is Thomas Morrison. He owns this house. Well, his company does. They bought it as an investment property, and we're staying here while our kitchen is being renovated." The 2 women stared at each other, both trying to process information that didn't make any sense. Lisa invited Jennifer inside, her hands shaking as she closed the door. They sat in the living room, surrounded by family photos of Lisa, Thomas, and their children. Jennifer's face grew paler with each photograph she noticed. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and showed Lisa her own family photos. There was Thomas, the same Thomas with his arm around Jennifer. Thomas holding a different baby. Thomas at a different child's birthday party. Thomas in front of a different house. "How long have you been married to him?" Lisa asked, her voice hollow. 6 years, Jennifer replied. "We got married in April 2017. We have a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son." Lisa felt like she might be sick. "I've been married to him for 8 years, she said quietly. "We got married in June 2015. Our kids are 7 and 5. The math was devastating. Thomas hadn't just had an affair. He'd maintained 2 complete families, 2 complete lives for 6 years. He'd married Jennifer while already married to Lisa. He'd had children with both of them. He'd celebrated holidays, birthdays, and ordinary evenings with both families, keeping each woman completely unaware of the other's existence. The 2 women sat in stunned silence, trying to comprehend the enormity of the deception. How was it even possible? How could one person maintain 2 separate families for years without either one discovering the truth? Jennifer finally broke the silence. He told me he travels for work Sunday night through Wednesday afternoon, she said. He leaves Sunday evenings and comes home Wednesday around 6. Lisa nodded slowly, pieces clicking into place. He told me he leaves Monday morning and comes home Friday evening. He's gone Monday through Friday every week. The schedule made horrifying sense. Thomas would spend Sunday night through Wednesday with Jennifer and their children in Riverside, New York. Then he'd drive the 90 miles to Maple Ridge, Connecticut, and spend Wednesday night through Sunday with Lisa and their children. He'd carved the week perfectly in half. But how did he explain his absences to each family? Lisa had always been told Thomas was visiting hospitals and clinics, attending medical conferences, and meeting with healthcare administrators. He'd show her his work schedule on his phone, pointing to appointments and meetings that now seemed likely to be completely fabricated. Jennifer had been told exactly the same story. The medical device sales job was perfect cover because it required travel and irregular hours. No one questioned why he needed to be away so much. That was just the nature of the job. Lisa called the police. Within an hour, Detective Sarah Chen arrived at the house and listened to both women's stories with an expression that shifted from skepticism to shock. "I've seen a lot of things in my career," Detective Chen said, shaking her head, "but this is extraordinary. The level of planning and deception required to maintain 2 families for 6 years is almost unbelievable." She asked to see documentation, marriage licenses, birth certificates, financial records, anything that could help piece together how Thomas Morrison had managed this double life. What they discovered was even more astonishing. Thomas had 2 completely separate identities, not in name but in practice. He had 2 bank accounts at different banks, 2 cell phones with different numbers, though he'd been careful to never let either family see the other phone, 2 sets of friends, 2 sets of family obligations, 2 completely different social circles. He told Lisa his parents were dead, killed in a car accident before they'd met. He told Jennifer his parents lived overseas and he rarely saw them. Neither story was true. His parents lived in Florida, and apparently they had no idea their son was married at all, let alone twice. The financial aspect was particularly complex. Thomas made a legitimate salary from his actual job in medical device sales, a job he really did have. But he'd been inflating his income to both wives, claiming he made far more than he actually did. He funded both households through a combination of his real salary, credit cards, and loans. He'd taken out a second mortgage on the Maple Ridge house without Lisa knowing. He'd borrowed money from Jennifer's parents under false pretenses. He was drowning in debt that neither wife knew about, maintaining an unsustainable lifestyle that would eventually collapse. And tonight it had. Detective Chen asked the obvious question. "Where is Thomas now?" Lisa checked her phone. "He should be at work," she said. "He left this morning for a sales trip. He won't be back until Friday." Jennifer looked stricken. "That's impossible. He's supposed to come home tonight. Wednesday is when he comes home to us." They both tried calling him. Both phones went straight to voicemail. Thomas Morrison, it seemed, had disappeared. The investigation moved quickly. Detective Chen contacted Thomas's employer, a medical device company based in Boston. The company confirmed he worked for them but revealed something interesting. Thomas had requested emergency family leave that morning, saying his mother in Florida had suffered a stroke. He'd said he needed to fly down immediately and might be gone for a week or 2. The company had approved the leave. Thomas's mother, when contacted by police, was perfectly healthy and very confused about why detectives were calling. Thomas had run. Somehow, impossibly, he'd found out that his double life was about to be exposed, and he'd fled. Police later theorized that he'd made a mistake with his scheduling, possibly telling Jennifer the wrong week about staying at the investment property in Maple Ridge. Or perhaps he'd sensed that the financial house of cards was about to collapse and panicked. Whatever the reason, he'd known the end was coming, and he'd decided to disappear rather than face the consequences. An arrest warrant was issued for bigamy, fraud, and identity theft. Thomas's face appeared on local news stations and social media. The story captured national attention because it seemed so impossible, so audacious, so carefully maintained for so long. How does someone live two complete lives? How do they remember which stories they've told to which family? How do they keep track of which child's soccer game is on which day, which wife expects them home when, which set of friends they're supposed to have dinner with? Lisa and Jennifer, thrown together by the most bizarre circumstances imaginable, formed an unlikely friendship born of shared trauma. They met several times to piece together the full picture of the man they'd both married. They compared stories, looking for clues they'd missed. Jennifer remembered that Thomas never wanted to take family vacations, always saying work was too demanding. Lisa remembered the same thing. He'd avoided situations where someone might post photos on social media, always having an excuse for why they shouldn't share family pictures online. He'd kept his Facebook presence minimal, with privacy settings locked down tight. There were signs, Lisa said during one of their meetings, her voice filled with regret. I just didn't see them. Or I didn't want to see them. He was always vague about work details. He never wanted me to visit him on the road. He'd get weird about his phone sometimes, protective of it in a way that seemed off. But I trusted him. I never imagined something like this. Jennifer nodded, recognizing the same patterns. He told me marriage was about trust, about not being the kind of jealous wife who checks up on her husband. He made me feel like I'd be disrespecting our relationship if I questioned him too much, and I fell for it. The psychological manipulation required to maintain such a deception was staggering. Thomas had essentially been living as two different versions of himself, code-switching between families, remembering different details of different lives. Psychologists who studied the case later suggested he might have compartmentalized so thoroughly that he didn't experience the cognitive dissonance most people would feel. To him, Monday through Wednesday, Thomas with Jennifer was one person, and Wednesday through Sunday Thomas with Lisa was another person. Neither was more real or more fake. They were both just roles he played. Financial investigators discovered the full extent of Thomas's debt. He owed over $300,000 to various creditors. The Maple Ridge house was in foreclosure proceedings that Lisa hadn't known about. Jennifer's savings account, which she'd thought contained over $50,000, had been emptied months earlier. Thomas had been stealing from both families to pay for both families, robbing Peter to pay Paul in an endless cycle that could never be sustained. The whole structure had been destined to collapse. It was only a matter of when. 3 weeks after he disappeared, Thomas Morrison was found in a budget motel in North Carolina, using a fake name and paying in cash. He'd grown a beard and dyed his hair, but a motel clerk recognized him from news coverage and called police. When officers arrested him, he reportedly didn't resist. He just looked tired, exhausted, maybe even relieved that it was finally over. During police interviews, Thomas was surprisingly forthcoming about his double life. He explained the schedules, the finances, the lies. But when asked why he'd done it, why he'd created such an elaborate deception, his answer was disturbingly simple. I loved them both, he said. I loved both families. I didn't want to choose, so I didn't. It was a statement that revealed either profound selfishness or profound delusion, possibly both. He'd destroyed 2 families, traumatized 4 children, and committed multiple crimes, all because he didn't want to choose. Thomas Morrison was charged with bigamy, a felony in Connecticut. He also faced fraud charges, identity theft charges, and potential charges related to the financial crimes he'd committed against both families. His second marriage to Jennifer was legally void since he was already married to Lisa. His children with Jennifer were legally recognized, but the complexity of the custody and child support situation was unprecedented. Lisa filed for divorce immediately. Jennifer's marriage was annulled since it had never been legal in the first place. Both women faced the difficult task of explaining to their children that their father had another family they'd never known about. The kids had half-siblings they'd never met. Their entire understanding of their family had been based on a lie. The case became a cautionary tale about how we can never truly know another person, how trust can be weaponized, and how technology and modern life can sometimes make deception easier rather than harder. Thomas Morrison was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to both families, though the money he owed was far more than he'd ever be able to repay. The real debt, the emotional and psychological damage he'd caused, could never be repaid at all. Lisa Morrison and Jennifer Morrison, two women who should never have met, who should never have been connected, now share a bond forged in betrayal. They occasionally have coffee together, their children sometimes playing while the women talk about healing and moving forward. It's strange and complicated and not something either of them would have chosen. But it's also real, in a way that their marriages to Thomas Morrison never were, because in the end, the man who lived a double life wasn't really living at all. He was just performing. And when the curtain finally fell, there was nothing underneath but lies.